Well, it turns out that not even the New York Jets can out-tank the Cleveland Browns. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, the Cleveland Browns have proved that nobody does tanking quite like the Cleveland Browns. They just lost to the New York Jets. I hope it was tanking, because if that was them actually trying that just lost to this iteration of the New York Jets, then it's about as bad as it gets. I mean, this year has been pretty god-awful anyway. Awful performances from the offense, from the special teams, bad spots here and there from the defense. But I think this would probably be the mother of all bad performances. Losing to the New York Jets and giving up 27 points to the New York Jets, losing in the fashion that they did. The Cleveland Browns actually scored more than 17 points today, and it still wasn't enough to beat the New York Jets, which any other day it probably should have been. So, going to talk about this game, keep it as quick as I can, because I don't think that this team deserves any more than that. I know I said in the preview I didn't want to spend too long talking about this game in the preview, and I ended up doing a 40-minute video. I promise that will not be the case for this video. As I said, this team does not deserve me speaking about them for 40 minutes about this loss. But just an absolutely awful loss all around. Might be one of the first games of the season where every side of the ball probably deserves heat in this game. Obviously more, some sides more than others. Defense, you could argue, again, the least amount of blame as everyone else, but even the defense deserves some heat in this game, which we'll get into, obviously. But the game started pretty funny. 2 weeks of preparation, both teams coming off their bye, 2 weeks to game plan, opening drives, scripted drives, usually, where a lot of teams have their most success, shall we say. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns have seen a lot of success in their opening drives, not really any outside of that. And the Browns come out 3 and out, and the Jets come out 3 and out in two of the worst drives I've seen in a long time, which was a hilarious start to this game. The Browns then credit where credit is due, only really credit for this offense, I suppose, other than the other touchdown. Responded with a really good, 95-yard drive to get their first touchdown of this game. And then the special teams just collapsed, I think, back-to-back, what it felt like. Gave up the kick return, gave up the punt return. At this point, I was ready to, fire Bubba Ventrone at halftime, just leave him in the locker room. I've spoken on this channel ad nauseum about how I don't understand how Bubba Ventrone has a job. Every single week I'm talking about how bad the special teams are, how bad the coverage is on these kicks and on these punt returns. Every kickoff feels like, every not just kickoff, every kick feels like they get 40 yards pretty much every single time. It's a guaranteed 35, 40 yards on the return. And if it's not 35, 40 yards, it's a touchdown. The coverage is so bad. That it doesn't justify the odd good play that we see here and there from this special teams. We get a couple of those blocked field goals. They're great, but that doesn't justify, as I said, being that bad in coverage. You get the really good play at the to end the half. All credit to the special teams there. Getting that field goal off after a terrible sequence from Dylan Gabriel. But that doesn't justify just how bad this special teams has been and continues to be under Bubba Ventrone. So, the Browns got the touchdown. It felt like, right, we could go on and kick on from this in this game, and immediately the special teams give up 14 points, and you were 7-0 up, and now you're 14-7 down, and just showed you how the Browns are just allergic to playing complementary football. It just seems that any time this season, these two units, especially offense and special teams, have struggled. But it just feels like any time, if you do get something good from the offense, either the defense or the special teams then gives up something on the very next sequence, the very next series. If you do get a big play from the defense, a big turnover or a big stop, then the offense is unable to capitalize. It's just every single time. It's just the Browns are unable to play complementary football. And as I said, it just feels like whenever they are able to get a big play, one of the other sides of the ball just immediately afterwards ruins it. And that's what we saw obviously early on in this game with the Browns scoring that touchdown and then obviously just giving up 14 points to the Jets. In the first quarter, 14-7 to the Jets. They had ran 6 plays. I think they had 2 yards, 0 first downs, and were winning the game 14-7. Just the most Cleveland Brown statistic you could ever imagine. The Browns were then able to, get back into this game, tie it going into the half, 17-17. At that point, you felt like, again, they should be winning this game. If it wasn't for the special teams giving up those 2 touchdowns, this would be a 17-3 game. The Jets were unable to move the ball on offense at all. That continued in the third quarter, but unfortunately, the Browns were also unable to move the ball really in the third quarter as well. And in the fourth quarter, just again, offense unable to move the ball. And the defense, as I mentioned earlier, this is where they came in and were disappointing. Giving up the 42-yard screen to Bryce Hall, who, Bryce Hall had that one catch, that one screen that went for 42 yards. Outside of that, no Jets player had over 4 yards receiving in this game. So as I said, you can't just put all the blame on the defense. The offense was continued to be bad, unable to move the ball. Special teams, an absolutely disaster. But just in moments where you need the defense to step up, as we've seen in other games, they were unable to do so. They give up that 42-yard touchdown to Breece Hall. The Jets are able to go and get the lead in this game. And then, even when, yes, the offense are unable to respond, but the Browns are in a situation where they can get the Jets off the field. The offense goes and gets some points. They get the field goal. They're able to technically get it within a one-score game, give themselves a chance. And then the Browns defense, start off well. They get themselves, I think it was like a third and, pretty long, 3rd and 16, I believe. They're able to get off the field, but a penalty on Devin Bush gives the Jets a first down. And, that's nearly pretty much end of the game. You had a chance to come off the field, give your offense, I think it was about 1 minute and 40 seconds with 2 timeouts. More than enough time to go drive down the field and score. But you get that penalty, you give them a fresh set of downs, and then even then, again, you get them into position, you get them into a 4th down. You know that they're not, snapping that ball. You know that they're only trying to draw you off sides, and you still let them draw you off sides. Just embarrassing way to end the game from the defense. As I said, they deserve less blame, as always, as it seems every week, than the other 2 units, because the other 2 units are obviously continue to let these guys down. I mean, it's hard to put too much blame, on a team that held Justin Fields to 54-yard passing. But that ending of the game from the defense was embarrassing and was unacceptable. And just because the offense is unable to move the ball for most of the game, just because the special teams is a disaster, continues to be a disaster, gives up 2 fucking touchdowns. That doesn't excuse the defense at the end of this game. Doesn't excuse the defense continuing to give up big plays, in big moments. I spoke about in the preview. This team will hold. It's hard to consistently get yards on this defense, but they are prone to giving up chump plays. What did we see in that pretty much game-sealing touchdown from the Jets? A 42-yard screen, explosive play. So Breece Hall pretty much had himself a day. 21 carries, 83 yards, 1 catch for 42 yards. Other than that, the Jets did nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing. Justin Fields, as I mentioned, had 54 yards passing. 42 of them were to Breece Hall. He had 28 yards rushing. That was second in the team. So outside of Breece Hall, the Jets did absolutely fucking nothing. But unfortunately, the Browns were unable to stop Breece Hall when they needed to. The Browns defense were unable to stop them when they needed to, and that was enough for the Jets to win this game. The Jets defense, after obviously trading away, their 2 best players, they played pretty well in this game. They got 6 sacks on Dylan Gabriel, who was pretty bad in this game. Will McDonald had four of those sacks, so a career day for him. Browns' offensive line continues to be poor. Jack Conklin was non-existent in this game. I think I could have probably done a better job out there than Jack Conklin did today. Was pretty much a turnstile and was giving up penalties. The offensive line continued to give up penalties. I mean, the first play of the fucking game was a 12-yard gain from Quinshon Judkins getting a first down straight away, and it's called back with a holding call. Just continue to give penalties in tough spots, continue to just be, not very good at blocking, which is obviously their main job. I think a lot of people, myself included, are just, even if it's rookies, whatever, I think a lot of us are just happy to see and happy to know that this offensive line is going to look completely different, and we're going to be washing our hands of this kind of, version of the Browns offensive line that we have seen the last few years, because, pretty much all those guys are on the last year of their contract. Joel Bitonio, I expect to retire. I can only really justify bringing one of those guys back if you do, just purely as a veteran presence. So we are going to see a completely different offensive line from the Browns next year, and I think a lot of us are happy to see that with just how bad they continue to be. Quinshon Judkins was good in this game, continues to show why we should be excited about him. He's doing all of this behind a terrible offensive line, and he's still able to get yards. He's still able to show that ability to pick up extra yards, get yards after the contact. One thing that impressed me in this game, and continues to impress me with him, is his vision. Something that a lot of people try to argue was his biggest knock, shall we say, coming in out of Ohio State. A lot of people kind of viewed him as that kind of just, one step and go kind of running back, but he is someone that has shown patience at his time at the Browns so far this year, and that continues in this game. Shows patience, showed the vision to, wait to see that gap, and obviously have the vision to, pick the gap and hit it. So Quinshon continues to obviously be impressive. Jerry Jeudy, I think he had one drop in this game, his scheduled drop, so that's obviously to be expected. But outside of that, he had an okay game, decent game, 6 receptions, 78 yards. The one touchdown pass from Dylan Gabriel was a good route from him, was a good throw from Dylan Gabriel, so pretty much one of the only good things that Dylan did in this game. Cedric Tillman had a couple of nice catches. David Njoku had the touchdown, but outside of that is still looking a little bit slower than we've seen in previous years. That seems to be a trend this year with David, and hopefully it's not a downward trend, but obviously we'll have to see. Carson Schwessinger, 10 tackles in this game, 0.5 sacks, two tackles for loss. Rookie of the year, no matter what the Browns' record is, I don't really care. But where was I? Yeah, so terrible game, terrible loss, terrible performances from all aspects of this team. Dylan wasn't very good in this game, 17 for 32, 167 yards. Did have 2 touchdowns, but just uninspiring. There was for every good throw, there's 2 bad plays. In the fourth quarter, he had that really good throw to keep the drive going to Harold Fannin, that kind of over-the-shoulder throw, and then just followed that up with 2 bad plays, a really bad throw, one that should have been intercepted, and then takes the sack as well. So just not great from Dylan. Obviously, the end of the half as well, taking the sack in a situation where you just cannot take a sack in that spot. Just, as I said, uninspiring from Dylan. It's not like he's going, I've said this a couple of weeks now, it's not like he's going out there and giving you a reason, staring you in the face why you need to bench him, because he's throwing a load of interceptions or he just can't complete passes, etc., etc. But when you've drafted 2 rookies and you want to see, what you have in both these guys, he's giving you no reason to keep him in there by any means. This is a guy whose biggest selling point that a lot of people had for him was his processing and speed, etc., stuff like that. This is a guy that's not been showing that. He seems to get flustered in pressure, seems to come off of that read quite quickly. So, as I said, it's not like he's going out there throwing a load of interceptions and, you're screaming at the TV going, you need to bench him right now because, he literally cannot move the ball. But when you got Shedeur Sanders, another rookie in there, at the end of the day, he's not doing anything to show you why you shouldn't make the switch to Shedeur Sanders. I don't expect them to do it next week. Obviously with the Ravens coming up, that's going to be a tough game. I personally wouldn't want to start Shedeur against the Ravens, so I think Dylan will get next week. But I think anything other than a great performance from Dylan next week, then they should probably start Shedeur Sanders against the Raiders and start him the rest of the way and see what you have in him. That's kind of where I'm at with Dylan at the minute. But offense continues to be poor, continues to be uninspiring. We had a play caller change. How much did it change? You could argue not too much. There was points in this game where the play calling did look a little bit more inspired, shall we say, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more creative in certain spots in this game. But overall, the same kind of problems that have pursued this season seem to continue even with the new play caller. Inconsistent, unable to consistently move the ball, and of course just continuing to shoot themselves in the foot with the penalties across the whole offense, but of course especially across the offensive line. So offense not really having themselves a good day, as they don't really seem to have any week this season, other than that Miami game. Malachi Corley I will just give one shout out to, because he had those 2 end arounds for 32 yards. He seems to be the first player in this iteration of this Browns that has actually been able to do anything with those ends arounds. They've been so hell bent on running those plays, and they've been trying to find guys that can do it. No one seems to have been able to do it. Maybe they finally found their guy in Malachi Corley, but as I said, offense overall not great, outside of a couple of bright spots from Quinshon Judkins, as I mentioned, Malachi Corley, Jerry Jeudy with a couple of nice catches, Harold Fanning obviously continuing to impress, but outside of that just continues to be pretty poor. The special teams, I mean, I'm just running out of words. I don't understand how he still has a job. The only reason you can justify keeping him in there till the end of the season is tanking, which is if that's the case, then obviously keep him in there. But other than that, I just don't see any way how the whole regime might get fired. But if they don't get fired and they somehow all keep their jobs, then they better fire Bubba Ventrone, because it's inexcusable at this point to continue having him as your special teams coordinator when the special teams is as bad as they are under him. And then the defense, as I said, you can't pile up all the blame when your special teams, when your offense week in, week out continue to make things hard for you. I completely understand it is tough, etc. But in the end of the day, they had 2 chances at the end of this game to give their offense a chance, give them one more chance to go and tie this game or win this game, and they were unable to do so. And not just unable to do so, but unable to do so in just the most pathetic way possible, which was on 3rd and 16, when you know that they're running the ball, you know they're probably not even trying to get the fucking first down, and you somehow get a defensive holding. Devin Bush, just inexcusable, unexplainable, just makes absolutely no fucking sense. Just such a stupid thing to do. And then even just as stupid, on 4th down, again, another chance to come off the field. You know they're not running a play. You know they're just trying to draw you off sides, and you still let them fucking draw you off sides. So again, previous weeks, a lot of people, any time that I do bring up any criticism of the defense, people will get annoyed and say, no, they don't. You have to blame everyone else, and I obviously am blaming everyone else for how bad they have been. But it's times like this where you have to, you've got to be fair with it, and you can put blame on the other sides of the ball for their mistakes and their disappointments and their shortcomings, and you've got to be able to do that for the defense. And this was a prime example of that, just unable to come through at the end of this game against a Jets offense that did absolutely fuck all game. So just a really bad performance all around. As I said, probably the first game where every side of the ball can probably say that they had a big part in why the Browns lost this game. Just really, really terrible overall. That was the game. As I said at the start, not even the New York Jets can out-tank the Cleveland Browns. They traded away half their defense, their 2 best defensive players. They only just won their first game of the season against the Bengals 2 weeks ago. and they still can't out-tank the Cleveland Browns because they still beat the Browns. Both teams now 2-7. Obviously, the Browns will now, by virtue of losing against them, be higher up in the draft order than the New York Jets. If neither team wins one more game for the rest of the year, the Browns will end up with the higher pick. So the Browns win the tank off. That is, I suppose, the good thing if you're someone that is sits in that kind of side of things and was hoping that the Browns lose these games. Because at this point, in the end of the day, I've made it kind of vocal on here before. I'm not a team tank guy. I don't go into seasons thinking let's lose every single game this year. I just don't think that results in any kind of winning culture. It just results in a losing culture that even if you do get the rewards, 9 times out of 10 you're unable to do much with it because you've created such a big losing culture within your organisation. But with all that being said, as I did exactly the same thing last year, we were like 2-6, 2-7 up to that point. I'm still saying you try and win these games, etc., etc. But it does get to a point where you can't fault anyone for saying what's the point of winning any more games. The Browns are 2-7. They're not making the playoffs. No one thought they were going to make the playoffs before the season. But now at 2-7, we know that they're not making the playoffs, especially when you look at the kind of the outlook of the AFC as a whole. 2-7, your season is over. You're not making any playoffs, you're not competing, you're not making it even fun at the end of the year where you might have a chance of making the playoffs. So at what point do you say, what is the point of winning? You're 2-7. I tweeted before the game that it's probably going to be really unlikely the Browns getting a top 3 pick just with how bad the Jets are, how bad the Titans are, how bad the Saints are, etc., etc. The Raiders as well. The Browns obviously are still playing the Raiders and the Titans this year, so I did think it would be pretty unlikely. But at this point, the Saints won today. The Browns lost to the Jets, so they kind of jumped both of those teams nearly. The Browns could easily see themselves in that top 3 position, and at that point, as the losses pile up, it just becomes more and more evident why those losses should probably become more on purpose, shall we say? I'm not I'm not ready to go full throw the towel and say let's just lose every other game the rest of the year, because we still have to play the Steelers. So I would obviously like to beat the Steelers, but again, I can't sit here now at 2-7 and fault or blame anyone for saying the Browns should just lose the rest of the way, go 2-15 and go get the first pick and go get one of these quarterbacks, because as I said, at what point when your season's already over, what's the difference between going 2-15 and going 4-13? There's not really that much of a difference in terms of your roster, but it can have a massive difference in terms of the draft position. So that's going to be, unfortunately, what a lot of the talk is going to be over the next few weeks. It is going to be just that. The Browns will probably lose to the Ravens next week. They're going to go to 2-8. They're then going to go into a Raiders game that, the Raiders are probably going to be 2-8, 2-9 at that point as well, depending what happens with the Jets, Titans, Saints over the next 2 weeks. You could be going into that Raiders game looking at losing it and have, being in position with the first overall pick, which if is the case, I don't think I can sit here and say that at that point I wouldn't be calling for the team to just lose the rest of the way 100%. So if that's what happens, expect that to be what I'm talking about after that Raiders game, if that is the case. But as I said, in terms of the actual on the field stuff, just awful performances all around. As I said at the start, if this is them not tanking, this is just embarrassing. The end of the game. I mean, even on offense, when they punted the ball back to the Jets before they were nearly able to get the ball back. Not punted the ball, sorry. Actually, when they gave the ball back on a turnover of downs, they had a 4th and 2. They'd been running the ball well that whole drive. They pretty much got that whole drive through running the ball, and they decide to run just some odd play, a pass play on 4th and 2 that didn't even look like it had any chance of working. That I'm sat there thinking, are you sure you're not tanking? As we did last year with some of the decisions, at that point you're like, are you sure you guys aren't tanking? But as I said, if they weren't tanking, then just an embarrassing performance all around. Offense continued to unable to move the ball. The quarterback continues to be uninspiring. I'm ready for a quarterback change. I think everyone's ready for a quarterback change, but I don't expect that to happen. I don't think it probably should happen until the Raiders game, because, going against a Ravens team that is in the midst of a bounce back. They've got most of their players back now. Do you really want Shadur's first game to be a 43-7 loss? I'm not so sure. But obviously, that's kind of where the team is at the moment. Special teams continue to be awful. Don't understand how he still has a job, and the defense continues to, be good most of the time, but still have spots where they continue to disappoint me. The Browns lost the game against the New York Jets, where their starting quarterback threw fucking 11 passes, completed 6 of them for 54 fucking yards. Only the Cleveland Browns, I think this was the first time ever in Jets history they had a kickoff and a punt return in the same game. So Browns just continuing to Browns and finding more ways to lose in the most hilarious ways against the most hilarious teams. But as I said, as I always say, I never like to end a video on a completely all bad thing. So as I said, any good thing to take from this game is that if you are in Team Tank, if you are looking ahead to the draft, the Browns had themselves a great day because they lost that, obviously, against the Jets, who are one of the teams in that bottom. The Saints lost, and also the Jacksonville Jaguars lost. After the Houston Texans came back to win that game, at the end they nearly blew it. They were at the 1 yard line, ended up 3rd and 14, 3rd and goal from the 14. They were able to get the win, so Jags go to 5-4. Let's just hope the Jags keep on losing, and if we are going to have to watch this pathetic team every single week and these pathetic performances every single week, if it can result in a top 3 pick, by their own pick, and a top 10, top 12 pick by the Jags, that will make the losing somewhat worth it. The Browns can go into the draft, go get themselves a quarterback, go get themselves an offensive tackle, go get themselves a wide receiver high in that draft. Then all the losing does seem to feel a little bit better in the excitement of that time. But you can't blame a lot of fans for checking out at this point, because, the losing can be boring. The losing can get tough every single week. It can be tedious. The only reason I do it is because I've got a YouTube channel and I've got to talk about it. Started my channel last year. I have now seen 5 wins and 21 losses since I've been doing this channel. So even for Browns standard, that's quite bad. I don't expect there to be many more wins this year. That's probably going to end up being 6 or 7 and 25, 26 losses. But again, as I said, if it results in a quarterback and a wide receiver, offensive tackle, the excitement at that moment will make it not quite as bad. So Browns suck. They lost to the Jets, but at the end of the day, if your team tank, you're probably happy, because not even the New York Jets can out-tank the fucking Cleveland Browns. That would do it for me today, guys. Let me know your thoughts of this game. Are you disappointed? Are you happy? Because, as I said, are you team tank? The Browns had put themselves in a good position to go get one of these quarterbacks with that loss today. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. But if you do enjoy my content, please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy, because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week, I suppose. Enjoy everyone talking about this game, I suppose. Well, actually, you know what? Enjoy loading up the Tankathon and the draft simulators. There we go. I suppose you can enjoy doing that. But even was as bad as it gets, guys, as always, go Browns.